Damn, at first I thought in terms of Doctor Who spin-offs 2025 would belong to the Sea Devils, but apparently it belongs to the Zygons. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mr. TARDIS, and recently Big Finish got the rights back to the Zygons. Created by Robert Banks Stewart, making their debut in 1975, in fact 50 years ago, the rights to the Zygons have kind of been in a state of flux on Big Finish. There's a few older Zygon stories, particularly the 4th Doctor ones, where every so often they'll just be delisted from the website and you can't buy them anymore, and then a few weeks and a few months later they get the rights back. But it seems that, for now at least, Big Finish have got the rights back to the Zygons, and they decided to dive headfirst into full-blown, spin-off territory. This is Zygon Century, the first box set being a trilogy of stories in a box set called Infiltration, with director and producer Jonathan S. Powell assembling a team to tell a bunch of Zygon-related stories that fit into one overarching narrative that spans, well, a century. We have a story in 1901 written by Jonathan Barnes, a story in 1935 by Lauren Mooney and Stuart Pringle, and a story in 1957 by Trevor Baxendale. And while each of these are relatively standalone with their own independent cast, and sometimes they just flat out change genres as well, they're all tying into this big overarching story that the Zygons are trying to enact over 100 years. And as you can see from the cover here, the second Doctor, played by Michael Troughton, is going to get involved as well. So the first story is 1901, The Unknowing Mirror by Jonathan Barnes. It's set in Edwardian London, and you've got this occult magician played by Jonathan Rigby called Herbert Scott. A young girl called Edith, played by Patricia Allison, gets in touch with him because he's been plagued by nightmares and seemingly possessions. Herbert enlists his comrade and also his best friend, Father Felix Cromwell, played by Jonathan Forbes, and they're on the case to investigate what is happening to Edith and what is this spirit that supposedly lays inside her. And surprise, surprise, the entity inside of Edith is a Zygon.
Now, it is time to get to the truth. I wish to speak to the one who shares your physical form. I want to speak to the intruder.
No, she's here. But she's too deep.
Then bring her forth.
No, I cannot.
You can.
I will not.
Madam, you shall.
No!
That's enough now, don't you think? She's clearly distressed.
No, if she's resisting, it means her defense is breaking down. Come forth. Whatever you are, come forth and make yourself known to us.
Who are you to speak to me so?
What?
Who is this? Who am I addressing?
I am of the Black Catcher.
The what?
What is this place? Who are you?
What manner of creature are you?
This should not be possible. This should not be happening. The mirror looks two ways. There should not be such confusion.
What really stuck out to me at first with The Unknowing Mirror is just how wonderful the dialogue and the performances are. The pace is very leisurely. The Unknowing Mirror is not really in a rush to get the plot moving. If you look at the first act of the story, which is predominantly these conversation sequences between Herbert and Felix, you'll notice that they just do a bunch of random scene transitions, like mid-conversation, just to break things up a bit, because the story is in no rush to progress. However, I didn't really find that to be an issue, because I thought the performances from Jonathan Rigby and Jonathan Forbes, and damn, you had Jonathan S. Powell directing and producer John Ainsworth, got all of the Johns. The dialogue just felt so natural. The charisma and the chemistry and the camaraderie of the two Jonathans was just oozing from the pores of the story. I was pretty enraptured very early on, despite very little actually happening. You've got a bit of a wrinkle in the story where Edith's father, Thomas, played by Pip Torrens, who you may remember as the head teacher from Human Nature and the Family of Blood, he's being excessively cautious and protective of what's happening to Edith and the people who she hangs around with, culminating in what can only be described as a Zygon exorcism that's really effectively handled. The Unknowing Mirror is part Sherlock Holmes with the Holmes and Watson comparison with Herbert and Felix. You've got the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in here from the setting, and obviously William Friedkin's The Exorcist, but it all melds together in a really captivating listen. The cast were uniformly strong throughout. I also really liked Lisa Palfrey as the housekeeper, Mrs. Maloney, and while the ending is very much, okay, we need to set up the basically the premise of Zygon Century, I still thought it was a really effective conclusion. A pretty downer ending that you'd expect from something like Torchwood more than Doctor Who. And that Torchwood comparison is what I think works best about Zygon Century Infiltration more broadly, just the sheer variety of stories and the fact that the Doctor is not here to rescue them from this really powerful threat, and that comes to the forefront especially in the second installment, 1935, The Miracle of Pendour Cove by Lauren Mooney and Stuart Pringle. The story centres around Freddie Truellen, played by James Northcote. He's recently lost his wife, he's under the thumb of an incredibly abusive father, the local vicar, played by Jonathan Keeble, and one day on the coast of Cornwall, he discovers this woman just wandering around lost and disorientated with amnesia. She adopts the name Vavorin, which is the name of a Cornish mermaid in legend, and while Freddie looks after her to try and restore her to health and to get some semblance of memory and identity back with her, she stays with him, and the two form a really interesting bond, which is made complicated by the fact that Vavorin is clearly a Zygon, but a Zygon who appears on the surface at least to have no ulterior motive. She seems to have amnesia, and she just wants to make Freddie happy, and she's able to use her shape-shifting powers in a way to try and please him.
What about your name? You must remember that.
Sorry. Would you give me a name?
Give you a...
Whatever you want to call me, I'll answer. I'll answer to it.
That don't seem right. That's not my place.
I saw you before. In the boat. And you saw me too.
At the bottom of the ocean.
Yes.
And in my dreams. I think I remember your hair.
My hair.
Is that where you come from? Not an island, but the water. I hope you've not come to tempt me away.
Tempt you?
It's an old song. A man falls in love with the lady of the sea, only to find himself singing for her below the waves. Forever.
Who is she? The lady?
A mermaid. Vavorin.
That's a beautiful name. Vavorin.
Now, before I progress any further on the Miracle of Pendour Cove, this is the first time that I've listened to a non-Torchwood Big Finish story that had a trigger warning at the beginning of it. Please note, the Miracle of Pendour Cove contains depictions of domestic violence, which we strongly advise is not suitable for young listeners, and despite the preparation, I still was not quite ready. It's incredibly harrowing stuff to listen to. It's very grounded, it feels really authentic and raw, and it's genuinely really tough and quite distressing to listen to at times. The story takes inspiration from Cornish folklore, hence, the name Vavorin, but there's also some, echoes of The Little Mermaid in there, and not the Disney version, the Hans Christian Andersen version, at least in terms of spirit and tone, not necessarily in where the plot goes. Charlie Russell as Vavorin is absolutely terrific in playing this sort of doughy-eyed, naive young woman who has no idea what she's let herself in for, being accepted in the home of Freddie, and James Northcote as Freddie is absolutely superb. He's able to really walk that tightrope of being this sympathetic guy who's lost his wife recently and is clearly undergoing trauma from an abusive father that's still ongoing, but he's able to subtly shift and adjust the characterization at just the right points that reveal that he's basically an absolute monster in ways that I can't even really describe in the context of this review, but it's really dark stuff, particularly when it comes to him utilizing Vavorin's transformation powers and the way that there's weird sexual dynamics of that. It goes in directions that you wouldn't expect, and it's really harrowing shit. Of course, there's the idea of him being under the thumb of this patriarchal abusive vicar who's respected by everybody in the town, and the idea of, abuse begets abuse, and, broken people break people. But even that feels like a simplification. What we're dealing with here is a really complex look at abusive power. Things like patriarchy and toxic masculinity, which was particularly present post-World War I, where this story is set. Previously, I've associated Lauren Mooney and Stuart Pringle with some really fun, offbeat horror sensibilities, and while that kind of is here in The Miracle of Pendour Cove, at one point our two leads go to watch The Bride of Frankenstein at the local theatre, and I don't want to say that I didn't think they had a story like The Miracle of Pendour Cove in them, but this is a pretty drastic tonal pivot from what they've done before. Even their more adult-orientated Torchwood Torchwood stuff is pretty, like, you know, laid back and fun by comparison. Like, their recent Torchwood stories is Poppet, which is disturbing and uncomfortable, but it's like almost comically so. And then you've got Dog Hop, where people's consciousnesses are moving to dogs. Like, you know, I'm not saying that they shouldn't be able to tackle a story about domestic abuse. I just didn't really expect it to hit this bloody hard. It's way too early to say if Zygon Century Infiltration will be in like my top 10 Big Finish releases of 2025 or whatever, but I would be surprised if The Miracle of Pendour Cove, like, just as an episode on its own, as an hour-long piece of Doctor Who adjacent audio drama, is not like in the top 10, just, you know, just on its own. And once again, what adds an extra wrinkle to the story narratively is that there is no Doctor coming to rescue these characters, which is a slight issue for the third and final story, 1957 Double Agent by Trevor Baxendale, because this one does indeed star the Doctor, the second Doctor, played by Michael Troughton, in Beyond War Games territory. For those who don't know, in 2022, Michael Troughton started playing the role of the second Doctor, once inhabited by his father, in a series of adventures that take place post-War Games, pre-Spearhead from Space. And where we find him here in Double Agent is basically during this first box set, when he doesn't have a companion and he's doing missions for the Time Lords. He's been sent to an island off the Cornish coast, this island which has no name, which cannot be identified or found, and has been a recurring theme in the previous stories in this box set. But also there you have an MI5 agent, Caldwell, played by Joshua Manning, and they find a local there, Harriet, played by Beth Lilly. The Doctor and Caldwell, with Harriet along for the ride, are trying to find a marine biologist on the island, played by Nicholas Pegg, who is there to try and find out what is happening on the island, what is a Zygon, and the Doctor is there to try and stop a broader conflict from escalating and stopping humanity from making a massive mistake.
I wouldn't get too close. Look at those spines. Could be poisonous.
So it's not a snake, an alligator?
I don't think so. Some kind of amphibian?
Those teeth.
Not native to this planet.
Not native.
It's from another world.
That's not possible, is it?
You're sure about that, Doctor? What was that?
Oh no! I think there's another one! In the cave!
Oh, jumping jelly beans. I think we'd better leave.
Wait! Grab hold of this thing.
What?
We'll take it with us.
Take it with us?
Come on, don't argue. You grab that end. Careful of the spines.
Oh dear.
Hurry up! I think it's getting closer.
Heave!
Oh dear.
Back up the path! This way! Come on!
Twice in one night. Oh.
Let's get the elephant in the room out of the way now. This is a story written by Trevor Baxendale, a once beloved Doctor Who writer from the expanded medium, who's basically been disowned by the fandom now because his social media profiles now exclusively consist of 3 topics: James Bond, anti-Semitism, and transphobia. I think it's a massive shame that Big Finish are continuing to hire Trevor Baxendale, and just narratively, the idea of Trevor Baxendale writing a Cold War thriller drama about a potential threat hiding in plain sight, infiltrating humanity to try and destroy it from within, despite being quite openly anti-Semitic and transphobic, is one hell of a choice. But like I said, he also talks a lot about James Bond, and I'm assuming that connection is the main reason he was brought on for this, because Double Agent is essentially an Ian Fleming James Bond homage. It might be a coincidence, but 1957 is the year that Ian Fleming published From Russia with Love. So with that being said, if you don't want to support Zygon Century Infiltration because of the involvement of Trevor Baxendale, then that's your prerogative, I wouldn't blame you. That being said, I've got to admit, Double Agent, I think, was the weakest of the 3, and not because of the Trevor Baxendale involvement, but because of the inclusion of the Doctor. Michael Troughton is really good in this story, however, his inclusion massively changes the dynamic of the box set, and while I understand that works in a sense of, you know, giving it variety, I think that Double Agent outside of the Doctor's involvement already does enough to differentiate itself from the Unknowing Mirror and the Miracle at Pendour Cove. It starts promisingly enough, it even has a James Bond-inspired cold open before the opening title, but then almost immediately after the opening titles, the Doctor shows up and then it just becomes another episode of Doctor Who as opposed to a Doctor Who adjacent spin-off, Zygon Century, and I think that sort of diminishes the stakes, it diminishes the impact. It's obviously a key chapter in the Zygon Century story arc. The evolution of human technology and military equipment means that the Zygons at this point can't really hide forever like they could in the first half of the Zygon Century, which means that by necessity their plans are now having to come to a head. But having the Doctor there means that these characters have an immediate out to a lot of situations that they find themselves in, and the stakes are negated somewhat. So as a chapter of Zygon Century, I thought it was pretty lacking because of that, and it just felt like a Doctor Who story. But as an hour-long Doctor Who story, it's fine. It's, it's the Doctor and an MI5 agent and a local villager, just making their way across an uncharted, deserted island, fighting off Zygons, evading capture, things like that. It's basically bog standard Doctor Who. It's solid, but it's completely unremarkable. The ending coda is pretty interesting, and it ends on a cliffhanger which indicates that there will be more Zygon Century, although at the time of making this review, we don't know anything about the next box set, or even a release date, or any sort of confirmation on cast or writers or anything like that. But Double Agent was fine, but believe it or not, I do think that it shouldn't have had the Doctor. I think that this box set would have been so much stronger overall without that inclusion, even though it might have been a bit harder to sell. But then again, I think that these stories, The Unknowing Mirror and The Miracle of Pendour Cove, that don't have any allusions to the Doctor at all, are so strong that, I think that it carries the box set on its own anyway. I loved the Edwardian horror sensibilities of The Unknowing Mirror. I think that Lauren Mooney and Stuart Pringle did an amazingly intimate job of portraying a Cornish myth meets domestic abuse drama in The Miracle of Pendour Cove, and Trevor Baxendale has crafted a pretty solid James Bond Cold War homage. Honestly, listening to this, particularly The Unknowing Mirror, when the box set was just getting going, I was thinking that this should just be how, the BBC do Doctor Who spin-offs. The premise is really strong, the groundwork is great, but fundamentally, the character work is so efficient and solid that, yeah, you could put this on, BBC One on at 9 PM on a Friday night, and it's a Doctor Who spin-off. It kind of makes me think that the War Between the Land and Sea has got one hell of a hard act to follow, but we'll have to see if the remainder of the Zygon Century is just as effective as this first box set. Thank you so much for watching this review of Zygon Century Infiltration. Let me know in the comment section below if you've checked it out. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already for more Doctor Who Big Finish reviews, and folks, I'll see you all next time.